We are so happy to have people from all over the world with us today, as we have invited the ocean and energy innovators community to join us for a deep dive into the issues of deep sea mining. And this has, of course, been an area that basically has been hidden under the surface for most of us for a long time, and that has suddenly made us in need of educating most of us much more. All of us that are working both with sustainable ocean industries, but also the actors that are involved in renewable energy transition. So within a few months' time, the Norwegian government is planning to vote on potentially opening the Arctic seabed, a territory the size of Germany, for deep sea mining. And this in a period where now more than 23 countries and the European Parliament has asked us to wait. So today we will try to shed light on the issues of deep sea mining from a business perspective, from financial perspective, and then look at this as a business case. And will this be the right business case for the world in a stage and a period where we will need to extract much more resources, renewable resources, from the ocean, and where we will need to transition from an economy where we are simply extracting into an economy where we are focusing on regenerative business models and making sure that we handle resources in a responsible way and keep them in the value chain. So we have invited a group of experts representing very different areas to join us today. And first out, we have Michaela Dumis from Minderoo Foundation, who is going to share with us both why Minderoo and Fortescue Industries have gone out so heavily against deep sea mining, and also looking at what are the alternatives. So, Michaela, I will give the word over to you.
Thank you so much, Birgit, and good day, everybody from Western Australia. So Western Australia is on the western side of Australia, and it's not only a very, very sunny state, it's also a mining state. In Western Australia, we have 94% of all our state revenue coming in from mining, and half of all Australia's income from that total merchandise export at about 246 billion Australian dollars is from mining, and half of that is from iron ore exports. And the reason that's, I guess, important is because the Minderoo Foundation, which was set up about 20 years ago by founders and co-chairs Andrew and Nicola Forrest, came out of the success of Fortescue Metals, a mining company started in 2003 to procure and sell Western Australian iron ore to the world. The foundation has three core focus areas: gender equality, communities, and oceans. And Andrew is really in that ocean space. Andrew has a PhD in marine science and a deep love for the ocean and a strong commitment to its protection. So it's not surprising that Andrew, founder of Minderoo Foundation, is in one sense a protector of the ocean, but sort of a little bit surprising in the other that Andrew, chairman of Fortescue Metals, is the first prominent mining executive to speak out against deep sea mining. And this is quite interesting also because Fortescue, while it mines for iron ore now, it's also an energy transition company with very, very ambitious decarbonisation targets around green steel, around green metals, and lots of targets in renewable energy, all of which require green technology and green infrastructure. And this change that we see, or this rapid increase in that need for the green, has meant there's also an increased demand for high-grade minerals, deposits, and specific resources such as copper, nickel, lithium, cobalt, platinum, etc., which of course are contained within the deep sea and have the potential to meet that increasing mineral resource demand. So this really puts Minderoo and Fortescue in an interesting position. A successful mining company, also potentially needing mined minerals elements for decarbonisation. So what do you choose? Do you choose climate change or do you choose the deep sea? But at COP27, Andrew Forrest publicly announced support for a moratorium for the deep sea mining, and that was through public media from both the foundation as well as from Fortescue. That was in relation to the chairman saying that we actually just have to have a better understanding, scientific understanding of the deep sea before we do anything in it, and apply and have best practice ESG regulations, including the same rigorous analysis and standards that we have in our terrestrial mining activities to seabed mining before it is permitted. And a moratorium is to be supported. So why was this done? First of all, that bit about scientific information I think is really, really key. Most of the deep sea occurs in the high seas, which belongs to all of us. And we really don't know a lot about it, except there's a lot of very strange looking creatures down there and a unique habitat. And it is responsible for a lot of our ocean and atmospheric circulation, but these are really not well studied. So we have to know all of this information before we start to change it. To that effect, we've supported the Minderoo Foundation and UWA Deep Sea Research Centre, which is headed up by Professor Alan Jamieson here in WA. He comes from Scotland, to look at submerged earth fractures and understand a lot more about the deep ocean and add to that information pool. Alan has found some fantastically unknown creatures, biochemicals, as well as plastic in the deep ocean that we really never knew about. The other thing Andrew noted is that the need for best practice ESG regulations, like we should have for all mining, regardless of its locations, to ensure we achieve a net benefit for all of mankind. Regulations have not been developed for the deep sea, which is astounding. And the technology is new. And the work has to occur in a very remote and difficult environment. So how can you, without understanding a lot of it, or having things in place, contain impacts in the watery environment where you can't fence things off, and plumes from mining have to be discharged from the surface? Now, in making these comments in the public domain, a miner like Andrew had to do homework and understand, actually, if we are transitioning to this green future, do we need to mine the deep sea and find those critical minerals and metals? And the answer, it seems, it's likely not. So in addressing and talking to the miners within the business, and this is also in the public domain, it looks like the market is actually taking us elsewhere, because there is quite simply a supply chain risk on rare and critical minerals that companies consider too high. And as such, there's many initiatives underway already to reduce that risk. It's simply a market-driven response. These include, for example, technology substitution. You see a lot of this in battery technology, from lithium TMC to lithium ferrophosphate, or chemistries to displace lithium in mobility, such as sodium and sulfur, which is a lot more abundant. There are also very simple moves to reduce mineral intensity in green infrastructure. And so you can build the same thing with far less. And in some cases, the numbers are a lot less, 75% less cobalt and nickel. And of course, there's also recycling. Incentivizing recycling, both through price signaling and policy, will assist in developing a circular economy. Wind times, for example, have an expected life of 20 to 25 years, and there's a considerable mass of steel and other elements there, which can be recycled really easily. So to this effect, the Foundation has taken steps in advocacy to support the moratorium, realizing that we really don't need to mine the deep sea. This includes supporting things such as the Deep's Rising documentary that's just come out. So please take a look. It's directed by Matthias Roots and narrated by Jason Momoa, who is a big opponent for deep sea mining. And this really looks at what that destructive impact could look like and what's being done around the governance by the International Seabed Authority. It's a very eye-opening documentary to watch. We also have really gone ahead to try and support impact campaigns directed towards that support of the moratorium. We work together with the UK Blue Marine Foundation to advocate support from the UK and Australia in relation to the ISA meeting that was held in July this year. And we're very pleased to say that a few weeks ago, the UK government announced its support for a temporary suspension of licenses to exploit those metals until there's enough scientific evidence available. And this move really is starting to bring us in line with a whole lot of other countries, spearheaded by Brazil, France, and Germany, to call for that pause until we know a lot more. Now, we're really hoping that the Australian government will follow suit with that, and we continue to advocate. Our key messages for this group are there are alternatives to deep sea metals, specifically including battery metals within reach, providing we continue to invest in innovation in technology, increased reuse and recycling capacities, and continued extraction of metals from terrestrial sources under greatly improved environmental and social governance frameworks. We do not need to go to this deep sea frontier. In fact, the market is taking us elsewhere. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Michaela, for your insights. We also have with us Ed Nedelcu from the University of Bergen. So I will ask you to unmute, Ed, and you will share regenerative models with us and the perspectives of a paradigm shift in order to enable us to source the right resources. So welcome, Ed.
Thank you, Birgit, for the invitation, and hello to everyone who's here today. So yes, I would like to go back to the main question that we have today in deep sea mining. Should we start deep sea mining? And this is one of the most controversial questions that we've had in a while, but it is the wrong question to ask. We've had a narrative from actors like the deep sea mining companies, the International Seabed Authority, or the government of Norway, that deep sea mining is needed to satisfy an increasing demand of critical minerals for the energy transition. So in other words, deep sea mining is essential in solving climate crisis. But demand for those minerals comes mostly for an increase in the production of electronic appliances, cars, services, the building sector, military, and so on. And those sectors support a rather narrow Western narrative of development. And that narrative relies on unsustainable rates of consumption in the West. So it is this narrative that prioritizes cars over public transport. It prioritizes short-haul flights and private jets over fast, reliable, and accessible train networks. It prioritizes planned obsolescence in products over durability and repairability. It prioritizes aggressive advertisement to buy gadgets you don't really need over what is really of genuine use. And it prioritizes production of electronic waste over reuse, repair, and recycle. So a lot of this scarcity that we're talking about today is artificially produced, on one hand, by production of goods and services with little or no use to society, and on the other hand, by producing increasing amounts of waste. In the current economic system, which is obsessed with growth, we don't really see an energy transition, but an energy addition, because the renewables, the renewable capacity that we constantly add, what happens is exactly that. They're just added to the energy mix, and they're not really replacing fossil fuels. And also the science is clear, because those unsustainable rates of consumption in the West can only be sustained if resources are extracted, processed, and transported cheaply from somewhere else. And this is done by what we call pushing the commodity frontiers. That's done either by going to faraway, remote territories, like the deep sea, and extracting there, out of sight, out of mind, or dispossessing communities in the global south, polluting there, and silencing dissenting voices, often violently. And we can see this inequality and imbalance in the global trade, where most of the resources, embodied labor and energy come from the global south, but most of the wealth is accumulated in the West. And just to give you an example, 10% of the richest people hold on to 76% of the wealth in the world, while 50%, or 4 billion people, they only hold on to 2%. Also, when we talk about emission debt, right? 10% of the richest people in the world are responsible for half of the emissions, while 50%, the bottom 4 billion, only responsible for 12%. So the idea here is that relying on technological fixes to solve the energy transition without addressing the moral baggage of the economic system that this transition is part of can only exacerbate these inequalities and legitimize further extraction. And that's also because a lot of the technology and innovation is driven by profits and not by social and ecological goals. And in order for technology and innovation to play its key role in the energy transition and to solve other global problems that we have today, it needs to be driven by goals and be accessible to everyone. So where does this leave us? Well, at least in the West, we should stop talking about extraction. Extraction should be the least desirable solution. And also we need to ask different questions. What kind of consumption is necessary to meet our social needs? And what kind of consumption is harmful for people and the planet? Which sectors of the economy bring little or no added value to our lives or are downright detrimental, and how to dismantle them? Why is it that the wealthy minority is allowed to inflict immense social and ecological harm? Why are investments from big corporations not subject to democratic rule? And what future do we want, and how can we make this future happen through systemic interventions now in the present? And also, very importantly, who has a voice at a table in areas like the energy transition? Because who has a voice at the table determines what role of the ocean is prioritized. Is it the ocean as an industrial mining site, or is it the ocean as a biodiversity hotspot, a carbon sink, a place of cultural and spiritual space for so many peoples? And who has a voice at the table also determines who benefits from research, policy, and investment. So the energy transition is not just about what technology and resources to use, but how it is governed and by whom. To give you another example, I was at the Arctic Circle Assembly 2 weeks ago, and the CEO of a copper mine in the north of Norway was asked to comment on the fact that his mine did not have the approval of the Sami parliament and the Sami communities. And his answer was that they're just a small company. There's not much they can do. This is something that has to be solved between the state of Norway and the Sami parliament. But this kind of behavior is part of the problem. It does not show the leadership expected from the business sector, but quite the opposite. So we're facing multiple global problems, from climate change and ecological breakdown to wars and poverty. And this is a cornerstone moment in our history. Also a great opportunity to roll our sleeves and work on redesigning the economy so that it works for all people and for the planet. And by we, I mean all of us: academia, state, businesses, civil society, local communities. We need all hands on deck. Worst we can do is stay passive and be complacent to the current system, expecting that somehow, miraculously, technology will save us, which it will not. And this applies to the energy transition, because the energy transition should not be used to legitimize this unequal and harmful economic system that created all the problems we deal with in the first place. And the energy transition should not be used to legitimize deep-sea mining. Concepts like deep-sea mining should be treated as what they really are: a dystopian nightmare. We can and we really must do better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ed. So that was the university voice from our end, and a tool we are, of course, built on the perspectives on regenerative models and moving towards zero emission and zero waste industries when we look at sustainable ocean industries and the green transition. Now we have with us Jan Erik Saugestad from Storebrand Asset Management. And Jan Erik, Storebrand, and you have taken a very active and very vocal role on the issue of deep sea mining, and I'm very much looking forward alongside the audience here to hear your perspectives on the investment case, or the an investment case on DeepSeaMining at the current stage. So word is yours. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Birgit. And you know, it's enjoyable to participate in this very important debate, particularly as the Norwegian government have a different point of view than many other states. So let me take one step back, and Ed referred to, you know, the notion of voice at the table, and Storebrand, as part of the Finance for Biodiversity Alliance, was actually at the table in Montreal, and you know, that agreement was very specific. You know, the Paris Agreement for nature, you know, to stop the loss of nature, we must make sure that it's not only the public finance, but also the private investors and businesses that are aligned. And that was our argument. Of course, the Montreal Agreement is often referred to as protecting 30% of sea and land. But for us, represented here, and also our argument in Montreal, it's really also about how do we operate in the remaining 70%. How do we ensure that the capital flows are moving in the right way? How do we ensure that we have mandatory disclosure and data and information that can make us take the most sensible investment decisions? And clearly, part of the reason beyond you know, protecting nature is really nature is a potential financial risk. So our job is really to secure the wealth of our clients, provide and cater for the best risk-adjusted return, and that's why we're engaged in this area. So coming back to the voice at the table, we strongly argue in you know, whether we discuss social issues, climate issues, nature issues, or deep sea mining in particular, it's really only through the interaction between governments, corporates, and investors that we're able to make change. All these three entities have to move and interact in a sensible way. You know, we really engage with companies, large and small. They need to understand their dependencies on nature and the impact, of course. And we engage with governments in the aftermath of Montreal. How do governments put this into their national regulation with enough scale and speed to affect the real economy? And on that point, of course, we are, you know, have a very strong dialogue and engagement with the Norwegian government on particularly deep sea mining. And we were just at a hearing at the Parliament where this now will come up for a decision eventually. So we made it clear that we will not invest in companies that have their main activity to extract seabed minerals until we are sure that such interventions do not have serious consequences for marine ecosystems. So in essence, this represents a moratorium. You know, the arguments have already been made, I think, why. Firstly, it's immature technology. There's a lack of international regulation. Most research reports show that we don't need this mineral for the green transition. And we do know far too little about the ecosystems. So this is quite high on the agenda for many investors. And I mentioned this Finance for Biodiversity Alliance. Just to give you the perspective, it's 153 financial institutions across the world from 26 different countries. representing something like $21 trillion in investment capabilities. So that's about 18 times the Norwegian oil fund, to give that reference. And you know, I won't spend much time on the argument we face all the time, that these minerals are needed. Our point of view is that that's not an absolute truth. You know, the projections of energy demand and energy efficiency is one element. Improvements in energy efficiency could certainly dampen demand. Circular opportunities has been mentioned. You know, efforts on land, and of course, also technology and the way technology develops, like Michaela also referred to. So actually, that argument, I would say, it's likely not that we need these minerals. And to get knowledge, to us, it seems strange to open up for commercial exploration. Why would commercial bodies just be very supportive of gaining information unless there is a clear intent of using this information for exploration? So at least that's our stance, and I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Jan Erik. And I see there are still people joining in, so that is great. Before we open up the roundtable and the kind of the FAQ on this, I will also share some of the insights to the work that we have been conducting at the Ocean Opportunity Lab over these past months as our part of our commitment to help uniting the innovators ecosystem moving ahead and support the work done now internationally and by the environmental NGOs, as we think that it's extremely important that not only the environmental communities and the global stakeholders, but our actual very vibrant and engaged ecosystem of the innovators and innovation resources and stakeholders that are working within sustainable ocean industries and renewable energy also now weigh in and engage in this important work to prevent and disaster for other industries. So I will just take you through a few slides that are prepared before we open up the floor to questions. And I see there are great questions and comments coming in here. So I will just share my screen and bring you into our work. Let's see. So, of course, now there is this huge focus to delay and to prevent the opening up of the deep seabeds for mining. And then we think that a great role that any stakeholder working with innovation and sustainable solutions can take is joining us in getting on board a mission to both saying, wait, stop, but also join us in mapping, identifying and help scaling the alternative responsible solutions to deep seabed metals. So we are in this to defend the deep. I mean, this is, after all, what we live with and by, and that also our coming generations will need. So let me just take you into the background for why we at Tool have dedicated so much resources and time now to focus on this area. Firstly, why do we unite for delay and the moratorium? We believe that any business case in our century needs to be robust. So we have looked into the legal aspects and risks. We have looked into the issue where we are at a time in history where we can't solve one problem while creating multiple bigger ones. We are looking into the costs and uncertainty area. And we are looking into this, the deep seabed mining issue, and how it can be jeopardizing other industries that we are completely depending on for the future. We'll look at this as a non-compliant resource for the biggest markets that we are focused on from the Norwegian side. The divestment case represented by Storebrand and their equals, and the financial risk and costs for Norwegian taxpayers. So there has been strong reactions globally to the fact that Norway seeks to open vast ocean areas to deep sea mining. And we are being asked, why does Norway lead a race to the bottom? What is very interesting to look at is that the areas that are proposed to open up for deep seabed mining are also, to a large degree, also especially vulnerable and valuable areas that are also representing fishery zones in a time where we need to extract much more food, nutrition, medicine from the ocean to feed and cure the world. It is quite remarkable that Norway, as the leading sustainable ocean country, is moving ahead to open up areas under very, very rich and also very vulnerable zones. So the global seafood industry, they have joined the chorus of groups that are calling for a halt. We see that this is truly jeopardizing some of the industries for the future when it comes to supply of renewable resources such as seafood, nutrition, ingredients for healthcare, biopharma, and the natural alternatives to plastic and new materials. Then we look at the problems that we might face by opening up the deep seabed. So as one, looking for the new medicines in the Arctic, we already know that the deep seabed has components to cure various types of cancers, essential ingredients to COVID treatment, Parkinson's cures, and a general hunt for the new alternative to the currently growing problem of resistant antibiotics. We also see that the Arctic seabed, it holds the same parallel role as the Amazonic jungle in Southern America, where it sequesters a lot of carbon. And we see that there are radioactive carbon from the Cold War nuclear tests that has been found in the deep ocean. So the question is also here, which kind of problems do we risk spinning off if we start opening these areas? The next part is that, of course, a huge rationale by the Norwegian government to open up for deep seabed mining is that we need to deliver metals, components for the green energy transition. And our biggest market is, of course, the European Union. And what is interesting here is, of course, to see that the European Parliament are voicing quite hard against, and a growing number of European countries have now gone out and supporting a moratorium or precautionary delay. And what will be interesting to look at is that deep sea mine metals may not comply with the new material requirements from the EU. We have also looked at deep sea mining and the UN Environment Programme. So I would encourage everyone to read up on UNEP FI and their published message, and look at the kind of the potential distraction and disruption of other industries. So what we also see, interestingly enough, is that some of the biggest financial backers from the industrial side has dropped their sea mining investments. And here we can look at both Maersk, but also Lockheed Martin, that was very early in this field, and they divested even before the UK went out publicly to support the moratorium. Then when we go in and compare the business cases, we think this is quite interesting because we have started the work now of comparing the business cases and prognosis towards 2050, where we look at what are the estimated revenue to be created by different ocean and renewable energy related industries, and how many jobs will each of them create. And we know that we have a lot of exciting industries to invest in for the future. We are looking at sustainable seafood, offshore hydrogen and ammonia and wind, offshore remote fish farms, ocean biotech, the battery industry. And then when we look at the deep sea mining case of this, even in the best case prognosis delivered by Rystad Energy, the size of this is quite small in comparison to other industries that we are looking at to deliver energy and resources to the world. And then we are in a stage now where more and more countries are joining a precautionary pause, moratorium, or even a ban. And it started with France through the Look Down project and Sustainable Ocean Alliance, business and climate activists from France that managed to turn France's government around. Now there are 23 countries joining, in addition to the European Parliament stand. And the last ones joining are Monaco, where His Royal Highness Prince Albert quotes that it's totally irresponsible to consider extracting mining resources when there isn't enough scientific data on these extreme marine environments to conduct operations without having studied their impact. And as we saw, the UK has just done an environmental U-turn and is now backing a suspension of deep sea mining. And I think it is correct that a third of the capital in the UK was already clearly divested and had made their standpoint quite a while ago. Then when we move further, we also look at the financial risk and the time to market. And in Norway, we had a very profitable industry in whale oil many years ago. And that went through a big growth period, and then it went bust because while the product and the resource was there was no longer any interest. It wasn't wanted by the market. And what we see now is that very few stand to profit from deep sea mining, while very many stand to be affected. And we see that this high-risk business case represents a gigantic investment cost, while the minerals may arrive too late for the green transition and end up unprofitable, while causing irreparable damage beyond what the commercial actors involved can cover. We have looked at this in the basis of two major reports that has been released with SINTEF as part of the NTNU has revealed that the minerals to be extracted are needed primarily for the next 15 years before peak demand. And then EY's best case scenario timeline for reaching commercial industrialized exploration is at best 15, probably up towards more 25 years from now. So that will mean that there will be a very, very short period in history where there is an actual use for seabed mined metals. And then the question is it worth it? And can we as business owners and investors and innovators take that risk? Planet Tracker was supposed to join us today. Unfortunately, our Planet Tracker partner is out sick, so we will add their insights later. But the sky-high cost of deep-sea mining is a report that I warmly encourage everyone to read, where Planet Tracker found that at a cost of between $5.3 to $5.7 million per square kilometers, restoring the deep-sea biomes from damage, if it can be done at all, could more than double the reported 2.7 million cost level per kilometer of the mining itself. we have also looked at this in the time of climate litigations. And we see that when we compare this with oil and tobacco, we see that future fines, court cases, and losses on high-risk case, who will fund this? Is this going to be Norway's next generation taxpayers that are actually footing the bill for this a little bit down the line? When we look at the development in climate litigations, we see that they are skyrocketing. So we are very concerned that will the cost of the restoration following extraction be placed on our children's future tax bill? And who is it that will cover this potential gigantic bill for exploration and for extraction that is followed by potential climate litigations? So we are asking the citizen youths and the local politicians of Norway if they are ready to pay for this. We consider that deep sea mining belongs at the current stage among these industries. We look at this as a divestment case, and we believe that the ethical aspects of deep sea mining at the current stage belongs alongside tobacco, coal, and palm oil. So we are now joining up. We have teamed up with all the environmental NGOs that work on this area. We are working with stakeholders and ambassadors from across culture and other industries, and now we need you. So we are calling on the ocean and energy innovators ecosystem to join this campaign with us and mobilize for Look Down Norway to hopefully get our government on the right side of history. And we believe in doing more than just saying no, wait. So we are currently, you can join us as a company or individual in our Innovators Ecosystem Pledge and an open letter to Norway to let Norway know that you won't use metals from deep seabed or fund or scale DSM companies if you are within accelerators, philanthropic funds, and other stakeholders that are mobilizing growth of innovation sector. Then we are conducting a Responsible Solutions 2025 challenge leading up towards the UN Ocean Conference in Nice. We are currently working on gathering the first interactive map and overview of innovators that are representing responsible alternatives to deep sea metals. So that can be new and alternative metals, innovative battery and energy solutions, and clean ocean solutions. And this is something that we have done last year on another field of biofouling together with the IMO and World Ocean Council on biofouling solutions. So we are now combining the mapping process and the interactive, fully accessible overview of alternatives to also going out and calling our global stakeholders and partners around the world that represents funds and accelerators and ocean innovation challenges to put this area on their radar and dedicate more resources to support the actors that are part of the solution. In April 2025, prior to the UN Ocean Conference in Nice, we are bringing family offices, owners, investors, key partners, and top relevant innovators with us to Svalbard to do an Arctic tall ship voyage on board the Statsraad Lemkol from Tromsø to Svalbard, where the focus is on the alternative resources and solutions. And the Responsible Solution white paper, alongside our partner, will be delivered in time for the UN Ocean Conference in Nice, taking place in June 2025. So this is high on our agenda, and I warmly and strongly encourage anyone in our global network, both to spend the time to learn more about the issues, the opportunities, the risks, the engagements going on now related to deep sea mining, but also to take your part in being part of the solutions and the alternatives. This is our current global map of ocean and energy innovators. So this will be now updated progressively and interactively in the period to come, with a specific focus on the deep sea metal alternatives. And we believe that individually we are one drop, but together we are an ocean. So there is huge power in what we can achieve together. And I hope that all of you want to join us and the responsible businesses and the environmental NGOs in making a difference in this case. So let's see, now we will open up the floor for questions. Let's see here, we'll start with, let me see. So we have, and let's see if we have, I will just unmute the speakers here. Let's see, there we go. Let's see. So Ben Lamudru has a question to Ed. He attended a circular conference some weeks ago, and according to the French Observatory for Mineral Resources for Industrial Sectors, we will miss up to 80% of the raw materials, even if we recirculate actively. So what would you say to them, Ed?
Yeah, thanks, Ben, for a very good question. Well, I would say that first of all, this is still a very technocentric approach to the demand issue. So it has to do with what can technology do within the current demand, within the current paradigm, right? And it doesn't really ask if there's a need for those minerals in the first place. So I think this kind of assessments, first of all, we need to really define what is circularity, and then also what is the purpose of that, and whether our measurements and assessments are just following the business as usual of a growth in material demand without questioning which sectors should be decreased or dismantled because they're not really necessary. So again, like, we need to look a bit beyond this techno-managerial approach and focus on technology and extraction. And for instance, downsize sectors like fossil fuels, cars, aviation, private jets, fast fashion, focus on healthcare, education, quality of housing, healthy food, and repairability, durability, eco-design of products. So I think that's really my answer to that.
And then we have one that I think is for Michaela and Minderoo, from Peter Haugan, who comments that it's good to hear about the difference between the need and demand. He wonders if major established mining companies are really active in wanting to pay for the technology development that would be needed for responsible deep seabed mining. Is the push mainly from technology developers and a few special companies and people like Metals Company and Barron? Maybe it's a question both for Michaela and for Jan Erik.
Well, thanks very much for the question. It's a really interesting question. I'll just follow on from Ed just before I answer the question. Just say I think it's absolutely right that there's perhaps no silver bullet to answering this question. We need to look at the way in which we consume in the world and our year-on-year growth, beyond just deep sea mining, and the trade-offs that we have to increasingly take with that year-on-year economic growth. But I think we also have to look at not just one silver bullet from the technology side as well. So maybe it's a whole lot of different, a whole lot of different methods that we might apply to this problem rather than just one. Metal recycling is really, really important, but then, actual intensity reductions, as well as, price signaling from the market is very, very important, and alternative technologies. So it's a whole suite of collective things I think we need to draw on rather than just perhaps one. The question about what do established mining companies think, that's very, very interesting. Actually, I did ask because you would think that a lot of the established mining companies have ways of working and best practice guidelines already, and profitable ways in which to extract things? The answer is that so far, the ones that I've spoken to, I believe, have said no. We are not prepared to invest in this technology for two reasons. One is it's much, much cheaper and more constrained to do it on land. And so, you know, from a profit-driven perspective, it makes sense to do it that way. And the second is that it's just too high risk. So there is too high risk for an unknown demand. So this market could go either way. There's a bit of a fork in the road. If the alternative technologies take us elsewhere, then investing in a technology that's very niche specific for a very remote and difficult environment to extract minerals out of doesn't make sense at all. So it's left to a few organizations like the Metals Company and Gerard Barron to work in that space. And as such, you don't see the types of, I suppose, deep scale technical advances that you might see for the mining sector.
Okay. And Jan Erik, do you have any insights on this area? I mean, normally when you look at, for instance, land-based energy companies, when we look at offshore renewable energy, they will be quite heavily invested and be part of industrial consortium, where you take land-based companies from the energy sector, the offshore actors, and the maritime, for instance. Do we see any such collaborations or coalitions involving established mining companies into deep seabed mining?
Well, two reflections on that. One is regarding, you know, the underlying demand, whether it's for energy or you know, these minerals. I think, you know, as Ed was talking about, I mean, we have a growth model, and I think it's very hard to move away from that growth model, but that's why it's so important, this interaction between investors, corporates, and governments. I mean, governments have the ability to put in place specific regulations that could dampen demand for these minerals. They could put prices in place that could, you know, dampen demand for the end use. So that's just, I mean, that's why we, you know, need governments to lead in, and that's why we engage with governments. You know, the EU has introduced, or not has introduced, but are working on, you know, carbon border tax. They're working on deforestation-free commodities. You referred to the fact that they are also skeptical about these minerals coming from the deep sea. So the governments have the tools, they just need to use them to address demand. Regarding profitability, I mean, it is a fact, at least in the debates that I've been engaged in Norway, that the industry itself tell the government they need subsidies if they are to move ahead on this venture. So coming back to Michaela's point of view, in itself, the risks and the profitability is not, you know, is not there. And why should governments then subsidize private players to go into this area, which is so challenging? So that's, you know, at least two reflections.
Then I have a question that I mean is open for any of you that would want to fill in. From Matthias, how can sustainability managers and directors in companies that investigate deep sea mining as a potential market try to get companies to drop the market?
I'll jump in. I think, you know, just not taking the arguments at surface value that you have to pick between a green future or a deep sea, and really looking a little bit further into the numbers, the directions, it becomes quite obvious that there's still a choice. There's a I suppose a societal choice, environmental choice, and an economic choice that can be made quite clearly, and to really draw that into the thinking of the company before just assuming that a direction has already been set.
And I'll just support that. I mean, we like to be, you know, fact-based, science-based. I mean, we support setting science-based targets on both climate and are working on the same methodology on nature. And it's really, you know, digging into what is really the underlying demand. Of course, there's a big question mark on technology, and you can be a technology optimist or a technology pessimist. But I think that's sort of where the climate debate has taken us, you know, the different scenarios, the different pathways, and we should do the same when it comes to these minerals.
And if I can just add, I completely agree with Michaela and Jan Erik. And I think dropping deep sea mining from a company shows leadership. And in these times, that's what we really need when we're talking about, you know, we're talking about the green industry, but we also need to show leadership. And this is really a moral choice we need to make, also based on the scientific evidence we have so far.
I have a question/comment from Espen also before we round off. So according to the SINTEF report, we need raw material to build up the next 15 years until peak demand. So he asks, shouldn't we then accelerate all knowledge gathering within potential sources for minerals and metals, both recycling, terrestrial mining, seabed mining, to be able to make the decision on what is the best sourcing for the materials needed? He asks, why say no to something that we don't know the consequences of? That is as wrong as saying yes to something without knowing the consequences.
Well, I'll jump in and
yes.
say we're not saying necessarily. I mean, what we're arguing is that at the current point, we don't know enough to open up and start entering the deep sea. We're arguing that there should be a pause, there should be a moratorium, there should be a way to get this information and to make informed choices, and that also goes informed choices about the demand.
Can I just add to this? I think fundamentally we can't really expect to solve the problems we have, solve climate change really with the same tools that created, with the same paradigm. So I think fundamentally this is really not the way to go. Every time we've been extracting further and further, I mean, the consequences we can see today, and that's climate change and ecological breakdown. So I would also question again this need that is being you know, is being perpetrated in the main narrative.
And I'd just add that, you know, I think that sort of critical thinking is absolutely excellent, because you do need to ask, you know, why and why not on both sides. That's precisely what we want from everybody. I think the feeling is at the moment is that there is not enough information, and the agenda is being driven by a small group of people or companies that have a vested interest in the outcome for a resource really that is for the whole of humanity and for the whole of the world. And unless you take it into that context and look at it at every angle, you might trade it off against something that you had hoped that you might not, which we have for climate change. So yeah, the point we're at now is really, you know, do we really need to do this, and do we really want to do this as a society, rather than just being taken there by the market?
Well, I think there are some good questions to reflect on. I thank everybody who's been joining, both participants and our great speakers, for sharing your views. And then, I mean, this is basically just the beginning. We have very short time, but we are definitely very dedicated when it comes to showcasing alternative solutions that might actually enable us to leave the deep seabed the way it is today, and rather make sure that we have a good fundament for renewable resources from the deep seabed. So any closing remarks that you would like to share before we round off, Jan Erik or Michaela or Ed?
Thanks very much for the opportunity, and really hope it goes well.
Yeah, thanks for also thanks for a great discussion and great questions from the audience.
Thank you for all the engagement.
So enjoy the day ahead, everyone, and I hope as many as possible come on board with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Birgit. Thanks, everyone.